I'm Ashley Stirrup, the Chief Marketing Officer for GrowthBook, and I'm so excited to have Fyxer here with us. We have Ben Fanning, who is the Senior Growth Engineer, and shortly, Leah Tharin, the Chief Product and Growth Officer, will also be joining us. So thank you all. And thanks so much, Ben, for coming on.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Just a few housekeeping things. The session will be recorded. We will send it out over email. We have the Q&A available here inside Zoom. And then we'll have a quick survey popping up at the end. We'd love to get any feedback you have on the webinar or what else you'd like to see us cover. Today is going to be a great session. First, we're going to have Ben start off by just giving us a little bit of an overview of who Fyxer is and what experimentation was like when he joined. Then we'll cover some of the experiments that Fyxer's run. They've had some terrific winners. And then we'll get into the meat of the webinar, which is really how they built an AI-powered approach to experimentation, really automated their whole experimentation process. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit of a discussion of where they're going. And they've really done a fabulous job of building, very custom tailored automated process for their AI approach to experimentation. So I think it's going to be a great webinar for everyone. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ben.
Thank you very much. So yeah, let me start by explaining who we are at Fyxer. So Fyxer is essentially an AI assistant that works inside your existing inbox, calendar, and meetings. And it just keeps track of the context around you, your team, and your work. And then it uses that context to help prioritize all your emails and draft replies and follow-ups, schedule your meetings, and just basically make sure that nothing important really falls through the cracks. It's probably the best way to define Fyxer, I'd say. Do you want to go on to the next slide, Ashley? So yeah, this is pretty much everything that we do. So the main tool that people come to Fyxer for is the organizer, so helping triage your busy inbox. And then the draft writing in your own tone that gets better as you use it more and more is probably the thing that people stick around for the most. And then we also, to make sure we have context across all of your workflow, we also have a meeting bot that sits in your meetings, takes notes, and tells you what the follow-ups are, who's meant to be doing what, and sends out those notes to various people who are in the meeting. So from there, in the beginning, so I actually joined Fyxer a year ago this Tuesday. And when I joined Fyxer, we were about 20 people, and we'd been operating for probably not quite a year yet. And I joined as the second growth engineer on the team. And at the time, there was a lot of sort of manual process around our experimentation. So our tooling setup at the time was kind of as you see listed here on the slide. So we used PostHog to actually build our feature flags and sort of run our experimentation. We actually ran the analysis for that experimentation via Google Sheets for the first maybe month that I was there. We used things like Dribble and Mobbin to get design inspiration, and we started designing our experiments themselves in Figma. At the time, we didn't have any designers working for Fyxer, so we basically designed everything ourselves. We used a RICE system to rank everything. RICE being reach, impact, confidence, and effort. So basically how we prioritize what we want to work on. And we still use that to an extent today. It's a good system to make use of. We did use some AI back then, like Cursor and Claude Code were definitely the IDEs of choice for us. And we used a tool called Chatwise to run various prompts around sort of brainstorming, ideation, that sort of stuff, but it wasn't particularly advanced compared to what we have today. And as you see there, yeah, no onboarding, no designers. So, sorry, yeah, that's good. As a result, the early stage was basically about focusing on the bigger opportunities as opposed to the sort of marginal optimizations. So as I say, we didn't actually have an onboarding flow when I joined. When users signed up to Fyxer, they basically landed into a settings page, and that was about it as far as onboarding went. So experimenting on building out entire flows from scratch, and figuring out the actual core growth loops of the product. So which of the features that we were building drove value for users and drove expansion, and how could we get users to those features and to value quicker. Um, for example, viewers of our meeting notes, someone receives value indirectly, and the question was, how can we convert that moment into activation for those people? And sort of sprinkled in amongst those were these smaller bets. So AI was still useful there to sort of shave off time. For example, as I said, we didn't really have any designers. We hadn't really worked out our brand yet. So we were running multivariate testing on pretty much everything. And that didn't require us to build it all manually. We could use AI tools to help run those tests around, headline copy on our landing pages, call to action, colors, copy, all that sort of stuff we could use AI for early on. And that's sort of the way we operated. Big swings sprinkled with smaller bets to sort of speed our learnings as much as possible. And in our first year, we ran a lot of experiments. So as I said, I joined as the sort of the second growth engineer. By the end of the year, we were still only a team of 4 people. So we ran a lot of experiments and we had a lot of losses, but realistically, that's fine when the shipping cost was low. And what we were optimizing for is velocity of learnings, not velocity of wins per se. So we've got 4 examples here, and in the following slides, we'll go through them. I'm British and therefore incapable of saying anything positive about myself publicly, so I've not included any of my own wins here. These are all from the team. So if we go on to the first one, Ashley. So this was an experiment run, and I should say these are all sort of in date order. So you'll see that this branding looks completely different to what we have today. And this was an experiment run by James to basically recreate our paywall during our onboarding. So previously we had a paywall which listed out the features a user would get and had a toggle to ask users if they wanted to if they wanted to subscribe to a monthly or yearly subscription. Essentially, the hypothesis was that paywall created too much decision friction and that we could reduce that friction at a key commercial moment by just splitting this into 2 cards and making it really clear to users that today you're not paying anything. It's free for your first 7 days. And as you can see here, this gave us about an 8% win rate, which is, great. If you want to go on to the next one. So this one was run by my predecessor, Cameron. And the hypothesis here is that, so for context, what you're seeing on the screen there is our sort of referrals page. And our hypothesis was that the existing referrals layout didn't make it immediately clear to users what reward they would get, and that by making inviting teammates feel more immediately rewarding, by just visualizing the value to them in real time via this, you get 7 days free, 14 days free, 21 days free as you invite more people in your team, that we can make that action feel much more rewarding. And the uplift there was huge. Over 200% uplift in the number of referrals actually being sent by users.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one. You could get some pretty huge lifts early on. This one run by Jesse. So what you're seeing here is for users who've been sent meeting notes. They'd come to Fyxer to sign up to view those meeting notes for the first time. And what Jesse basically did here was built a nicer preview of the sort of the meeting notes, almost like you're just one step away from being able to see what you came here for, and making it sort of personalized. So with details of the meeting itself, the name of the meeting, who's trying to share them with you, just to make it really easy to make the decision to just click in, sign up, get the value you came for. And that one again, significant winner for us. So almost a 5% increase in our sign up rate for one of our key PLG loops. And the last one we have is from our newest recruit, Ziad. So here, this is basically an example of the right suggestion at the right moment. So previously, users had to think about who they were going to refer. We weren't suggesting to them, here's who we think should be joining your team. But at this point in the onboarding process, we already have an OAuth connection to a user's calendar. So we know who they meet with and a connection to their email. So we know who they communicate with the most. So we know who would get the most value from them when they signed up to Fyxer. So here, what we've done is just pre-populated these pills with who we think would get the most value from Fyxer in that user's team. And again, a 20% uplift there.
Those are all pretty great wins. And even with all that, you still only had a 25% win rate. So it just shows the importance of iterating and testing a lot of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And not everything we test is a winner first time. There's a lot of stuff that we test, it fails. We dive into the data to work out, did it fail for everyone? Is this a winner for some people, but other people don't like it? Is there a way we should be retesting this? You can get a lot of wins out of losses. And similarly, you can also get a lot of wins out of wins. Like one win shouldn't be the end of an experimentation process. You can often double down and really drive home value.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
So looking sort of where we were a year ago, we talked about at the start, which was a lot of sort of manual process. We'll start talking here about some of the additions we had. So the first unlock was moving to GrowthBook, which made life a lot easier compared to a Google Sheet running analysis. The AI tooling generally just became more useful as we started to create AI tools and iterate on the prompts that we were creating. And also the models behind them just over time have obviously got better and better and better. So the AI tooling, which we'll dive into a bit more deeply in a few slides' time, definitely helped us out. Over the year, we sort of transitioned through various tools. So I talked at the beginning about Chatwise, which was a tool we used early on. We transitioned through a tool called Manus, which both of these tools are essentially platforms where you can connect multiple MCP servers and run prompts where they can talk to multiple different platforms and give you a result and output a result to different areas. And for now, what we're using is cursor agents. So that's sort of the the platform of choice for us today. The power calculations are quite a recent topic, and Leah will, cover those a little later on when she comes to talk about the sort of the one-pager system that we've recently adopted and the data team's work there. As I say, we're still using Rice. We use a tool called Dot, which is really useful in Slack to allow us to query our BigQuery database without us having to go through our data team repeatedly with data requests. And we still use PostHog for analysis and building funnels. And yeah, we have in-house designers now, which makes a huge difference because it means we have a really solid base of a design system. So things like Figma's AI, Cursor agents, and Claude Design aren't building from scratch. They're all using a consistent, good base design system, which makes the output markedly better.
It's great.
So a few examples of the automations that we've made over the last few months. The first important thing is the MCP connection to GrowthBook. So all of the automations that I'll talk about basically in one way or another are connected into GrowthBook in order to get experiment data or create experiments. And so that our various other sub-agents can query experiment results directly rather than us having to do any sort of back and forth. So the first one to talk about is probably our runtime checker. So this is basically just a cursor cloud agent. All of these agents, unless I specify it elsewhere, will be cursor cloud agents. But it's essentially, it runs every day, monitors all the experiments that we have running, and flags issues like experiments that are running too long, um, and guardrail regressions or low sample sizes or anything like that, basically. So that's really useful. Basically, you don't need to go daily to look at GrowthBook and see what the entire team is working on. If there's any issues, it will be flagged to us at 9 a.m. in the morning, which is nice. Our AI comms manager, I won't talk too much about because we've got a sort of a detailed look at that coming up in a few slides' time where we just look at how we trigger it, what the prompt is, what the result is, and I can share the full prompt for that and others with anyone who's interested in them. The experiment cleanup is probably my favorite of the tools that we have because so what this is essentially an agent that reads a GrowthBook result, understands which variant has been the sort of the winner in that experiment, and goes to GitHub, creates a pull request to remove the losing variant code and clean up the feature flag from the code base so that we can then review the PR and merge that in. And without something like this, growth engineering essentially becomes 50% cleanup work, or you become an incredibly unpopular team within the engineering structure because you're just littering the code base with feature flags and experiments. So I'm a big fan of the cleanup bot that we have. Basically, less admin, less experiment debt, and as I'll talk about in a second, more sort of visibility of what we're doing is what these tools give us.
I like how you described it as you were automating away all the not fun parts of your job.
That's basically it. Yeah. It's like growth engineering is by far the most enjoyable job I've ever had. And I used to be a ski instructor. So like that's a that year I thought that was my dream job. I actually enjoy this even more. But there are parts of it that are sort of tedious and boring sometimes. But we've pretty much got rid of all the tedious and boring bits. So we now just get to do the fun experimentation, ideation stuff, which is great.
That's great.
So, other things to talk about here, and the first one, this code review via cursor, this sort of ties into the cleanup bot that we have because low risk, very low risk PRs get auto approved by our cursor bug bot. So it means that for things like cleanup, where there's no real code risk, there's no further review needed, we don't even need to block another developer to do the PR review. Um, Anything below very low risk, it doesn't auto approve. You need to go and get someone, but it makes that sort of that cleanup process much easier. Um, the learnings database is another agent that sort of so at the moment, what this does is it pulls all of our data on statistically significant results. So anything that we think we've learned and drops it into a structured database to allow for easy querying by anyone in the company. So people can ask, what have we learned in this area? Or what have we learned around this topic to help them in their ideation for things they might want to build or experiment with in the future? I think that's probably like the most basic version of what it is at the moment. But right now, this week, I've added 6 new cursor agents as part of this. The idea is to build a self-improving ideation loop where all the agents sort of have defined roles and almost work against one another to generate, critique, and prioritize new ideas based on these learnings that we've had in the past, and then also score the experiment ideas based on me, the human in the loop, as well as future experimentation results. But it's one of those things that as I've started working on as I've started working on it, I've realized just how much time I could spend on this. So I'm really trying to limit myself to a proof of concept at the moment. But it's a very hot topic in growth engineering at the moment, this idea of self-improving experimentation.
Yeah, I think it's really smart that you've broken it up into a series of agents that way.
Yeah, I think if you don't do that and give them really defined and strict roles, it's very hard to not end up with a sort of a blasé soup where they all kind of just agree with each other.
Yeah,
But yeah, I can share more info on that as I build it.
sounds good.
So, with that said, this is kind of a snapshot of what we have today. And what you'll see is it's basically lots of small independent tools connected across our workflow, as opposed to sort of one overarching AI tool. So Cursor and Claude Code still are our go-to choices for IDEs. Cursor agents are where we run all of our sort of our cloud agents, all the things I've just talked about, all our automations. So all of that good stuff. Data-wise, we still use Dot. All of our experiments get dropped into Slack, which we'll again look at in just a moment. We'll look at one example of our AI comms manager before I pass over to Leah. And then in terms of how we ship, the sort of one-shot implementation with Claude and with Codex is basically what I'm talking about there is small fixes and tweaks, that sort of stuff, as opposed to building experiments wholesale. We can basically just pass those off to a sort of an AI web engineer, if you like.
And for the more sophisticated ones, I believe you're like using Claude, sorry, Cursor desktop, like a virtual desktop, to actually generate an image of like the A and the B so that you can review those. Is that right?
Well, it's kind of dependent on the person. We don't have any strict rules on like what we do as a team. I use Cursor as a sort of IDE exclusively for when I'm building experimentation, unless it's very small, and then I'll use the cloud agents to sort of let it one hit the PR. But it certainly has the capabilities to sort of just bring up a snapshot of your browser, if that's the way you want to work.
Got it. Shall we keep going?
Yeah, let's move on to the sort of the deep dive into just uh, one of our prompts. So this one is, and I'll preface this by saying that since I joined, and in fact, the company I've worked at previously, where I also worked with my predecessor Cameron, we've always had a dedicated Slack channel where we post absolutely everything experimentation. So this is everything we launch, everything we conclude, and every result, so that you're building in public, you build this real sense of trust internally, and you share your learnings as easily as possible. And the idea behind this particular AI agent is just to make that process as easy as possible for the growth engineers. So all you need to do to trigger it, we'll look at the trigger, then the prompt, and then the result. The trigger is here. We have a specific Slack channel called AI Experiment Comms Manager. And we simply say launch and give it a URL of a GrowthBook experiment, or it can also just take the ID of the experiment. And then if you move on to the next slide, you'll see the start of the prompt itself. So what you're looking at here, if you haven't used a Cursor Cloud Agent before, this is this is basically the create an automation page. So the first thing you do is define the trigger for the agent. So here the trigger is it's matching a regular expression of launch in the AI Experiment Comms Manager channel. And when it's done, it will give us a tick. The prompt itself is quite long and it's not particularly interesting. So I've not screenshotted the whole thing here, but essentially the next section is just the prompt of exactly what the agent should do when it's triggered. And then if you move to the next slide, down at the bottom is all of the MCP connections that it has access to. So this one only really needs to have access to GrowthBook to get the experiment data, and to Slack itself to be triggered, one, and to post, two. And the next slide is basically the result of that. So here's what happens in our topic experiments channel when we trigger a launch. Gives us a structured layout there, which is great for visibility because everything looks the same. People know exactly what to expect. Also makes extracting learnings later faster via other MCP tools. Basically, AI removes the sort of the operational drag of the communications. it doesn't stop us adding more if we want to. We tend to just let Cursor do this and then drop stuff in thread if we need to. Um, the other side of the comms is the sort of the conclusion. I think the next slide is a look at what that looks like. So the prompt and the trigger look very, very similar, so we've left them out. But this is an example of one of our Slack posts where an experiment's concluded. This one has concluded as a winner. And it basically lists out all of the primary metrics, secondary, guardrails, everything. And yeah, I think that's about it.
And one of the things that I've heard is that you starting to push all this stuff into Slack kind of created a bit of a snowball there where suddenly everybody wanted to share kind of all their different types of results, right?
Yeah, it's a really good practice to get into. Because as I say, when you're building in public, when you're internally building in public, it's a bit of a weird turn of phrase, you're basically just building incremental trust. Everyone, everyone knows what you're working on, what the results were, what the learnings are. And it's a really good place to just collect initial feedback. Like I was talking about before, you don't stop at one win. So I ran an experiment maybe last month that was just a very heavy education page on our onboarding. So it was real positive friction ad, which increased our sort of connection rates. And the thread in that was just full of people saying, hey, why don't we think about adding this here? What about if we did this? Have we thought about adding a big page here? It's just a great place to start driving those conversations, to be honest.
Yeah, and it also just generated a lot of enthusiasm to do more experimentation too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you see wins, you want to see more wins.
Yeah, yeah. I guess this is just the last bit of that
Yeah.
result. Yeah.
Cool.
So I'll pass over to
Cool.
Leah now.
Welcome,
Yes,
Leah.
I hope you guys can hear me well. Otherwise, just let me know. So I'd like to speak about a couple of steps in how we're, I guess, like handle experimentation outside of the automation part. And then I'm going to also talk a little bit about what are some problems that are usually also coming up afterwards. So just like to give you a little bit of an inside view. A very important thing that we started to realize is that it should be also made easier for humans, so to speak, to analyze experiments before they actually hit the pipeline. So if you're thinking about just calculating power or like what does it take for something to test, we noticed as well, like from people outside of Ben and the growth engineers, that it is quite helpful that they know how long that something will take to derive certain results, just from knowing, like, I don't know, we have 20,000 users that are hitting the pipeline on this one. So if we're trying to do an experiment around trials, how long would it take? The reason why I'm mentioning this is that this is sometimes just like killing certain ideas. So for a lot of people in the business, it's always very easy, you know this, right? Like you're not coming from experimentation. It cannot be that hard, right? Like everybody.
Oh, Leah, we're losing you a little bit here. We'll give you a second to come back.
Calculator where we can just also preemptively just try to on a quantitative test versus like a qualitative one, which is going forward. Please, next one.
Yeah, Leah, I
It's
think we're
about, oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
sorry, I think your
No?
internet is cutting in and out, unfortunately. So Ben,
No,
I hate to put you on the spot,
no, sorry.
but
I am so sorry.
that's okay. I understand. Leia's I believe, at the airport. Um, I would suggest, Ben, we put you on the spot and ask you to do the talking on these. Sorry, Leah.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe a bit of context on this. As I was saying before, she sort of cut out a bit. There is a great value in being able to determine prior to running experimentation whether it's worth running said experimentation. So one of the things that our data team has built is this one-pager experiment creation platform whereby you can input the topic, sorry, not the topic, the surface, you're wanting to experiment on the target audience you're wanting to use as traffic and a sort of expected uplift based on your sort of gut feel. And it's linked into our BigQuery database and pulls live data to tell you exactly how long that would take to reach that expected effect size. So I think what Leah was just alluding to right at the end there was that basically cuts out a lot of the we think we want to experiment on this, we build the experiment, we run the experiment, and we never got close to a significant result. And instead allows you to sort of do quick ideation, run it through these forms and go, oh, actually, we'd need a huge uplift here, or we'd need to run it for multiple months, which is super helpful. The other side of this, of course, is, well, I shouldn't say, of course, the other side of this is that alongside the sort of tools, power calculators to get an idea of how long we need to run something is once you are ready to run an experiment, this is a full list, and I haven't got the full list in the full list of inputs in these screenshots, but it's around 12 different sections to lay out exactly everything about the experiment, basically. The idea being that it's kind of a foolproof system where anyone, whether they've run experiments before or not, can generate a very clear one-page document on what they're experimenting on, why, what the uplifts are, etc., images of what we're doing for control, images of what we're doing for the variant versus the control. So if you go to the third
Yeah, just
step.
one thing I wanted to
Oh,
just
please,
point
yeah.
out here is that your data team has done a lot of work around kind of building stuff into Notion. So this that's kind of one of the reasons why this lives in Notion is because it's part of a bigger analytics thing, right?
I should say, sorry, even though it looks like a Notion, this is just an internal tool that's all of
Oh,
our data lives in its own platform.
got it. Got it.
But
Okay.
yes, you're absolutely right. It lives within there. It wouldn't necessarily have to like it, as you say, there's plenty of tools that GrowthBook provide to allow for this.
Got it. Leah, looks like you're back.
I've tried, yeah. Can you hear me better now?
So
Yes.
far, so good.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right. I'm so sorry.
All
Yeah,
good.
I'm a good example of things that just can go wrong. It's an adventurous story, but let me just take over. So, sorry, Ben. I'm not sure what you've talked about this particular step, but the one pager is an extremely important thing for us on experimentation because everything that the growth team has done that you can compress in terms of, like the technical part of it is only as good as what we are actually wanting to test, of course, and having people sit down and think and figure out what we do, why we're doing it, what the before and afters are. So basically the rigor and the quality of it is extremely important. If you think about this, Ben explained before how we are storing all the experiments and what we have done. If we do not attach to this every time why we've done it, then no AI model that will recover that data 3 months later in the future will be able to do anything with these results meaningfully. And this has become a big problem for us because if you think about it, like if you're a very early startup and you're experimenting, it's relatively easy to have I mean, in relation, but like it's relatively easy to have the big swings and the metrics are simple. Now we are operating on scales where like having a 1 or 2% improvement to anything is just a big win normally. And even then, we need to make sure that the net effect is kind of like positive. So in order to trace changes on stuff that we change, because we also have salespeople working with the same systems, right? Like we have people working on the same flows multiple times during the week and so forth. It's very important that you can start to trace this stuff back. Next slide, please. And the fourth step in this, can you go one forward? Yeah, it has become very important for us to have also an overview for humans in that sense, because what Ben also clarified before is that there's one thing where you can push stuff into Slack channels that I can also scrape, but to have an overview on what is currently going on, what has been recently happening, is still important also for people who do not know what they're exactly looking for. Right? So like if you think about like, hey, what is everything that we have done on a very specific keyword, then you will have an AI probably find it. But if you did not remember this, like, hey, what did we actually experiment on in the last month? Unless you've been extremely rigorous and very, very precise, you sometimes just need an old school kind of like dashboard where you can just like see like, oh, didn't we talk about this, right? Because you have a lot of people that are messing with this stuff from marketing and from sales and so forth, and they are not experiment experts. So us having an overview where we can access these results, even if we're not growth engineers, has become extremely important. Next slide, please, because this is tying into what I've been thinking a lot at scale. So when we're talking about scaling experimentation, it's not just about how do you scale experiments more so you can do more and more and more of them, but how does experimentation work in a scaling organization? So we want everybody in the organization to be able to experiment in general. And so this means we have a permissionless system by default, which means you do not have to ask for permission, but you can already imagine what's going to happen if you're not rigorous about this, right? People can experiment maybe a little bit too quick. And it's not so much that they're breaking something. I think our team has been absolutely exceptional to automate what we have and what Ben also presented today in a way that is safe and that makes sense. But we started to see that if you're making it too easy, on the other hand, then people are also not thinking too much anymore about their ideas. So if you make it too easy for marketing to experiment on certain stuff, nobody's really asking anymore, like, do we really need that? And so forth. And this can sometimes be detrimental. So the current challenges that we have are actually not how to make experimentation faster, but to really make sure that what we're doing does make sense. And a lot of this, ironically, is coming out of qualitative research, like understanding why are specific users doing what they do, because you cannot read out everything from a quantitative experiment. We've had a good example for this, like I think last week, where Ben was creating a very good onboarding flow for specific devices that looked like it was failing. But if you look at this afterwards and you subsegment the data, then you see that certain people actually massively profited from the experiment because the overall downturn that we've had was true. But we almost overlooked this because we didn't take enough time to then also let it run and then just analyze it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the difficulty on scaling this stuff is to really know when can you afford to not look anymore? When can you afford not to spend time at the beginning and at the end of the experimentation? I know this is a bit fuzzy, but like this judgment quality is extremely hard, and it is on us also from the product management side to enable Ben and everybody else in growth engineering in general to have a better idea and more confidence that the direction is correct that we're taking. Because we've hit a wall where we can say like, yeah, we can run another 400 or 500 experiments, but we also want to make sure that they're the correct ones. But yeah, I just wanted to say that just because you're automating the tech does not mean that you can automate the judgment, and the other way is also not the case. And I think we have absolutely mastered the tech side, but the judgment itself, we really need to get better at that. And this is a very, very specific challenge at scale, especially also because the markets are constantly changing and what people want, and that essentially has become very easy to ship things. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in a super dynamic market right now. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, the whole decision-making process and the learning process is, that's the hardest part to automate.
Yeah. And I kind of like this because there's a question right now in the Q&A. If I might just take this one.
Sure.
So Ashwini was asking, like, have you ever shipped a result that turned out to be a false positive because the experiment was set up wrong? What do you do to avoid that? So the problem is, if you ever shipped it, the chance that you're going to realize that it was a mistake is increasingly going down because you shipped it already, right? So I think your question is very interesting. Personally, I can say that out of the couple hundred experiments that I have run in my career, I definitely did that. And usually what you start to see is mistakes that you do early in a funnel. So I don't know, let's just say you have a very strong conviction that a specific trial length is the correct bet to make in an experiment, like in a funnel that you have. And you kind of accept that this is a universal truth, then it starts to kind of go through the entire organization. You know, in every meeting that we have, we're saying like, oh yeah, this amount of days is the correct thing because we've tested it at some point. I do encourage people in general to recheck the things that they believe to be true that are very, very, very important at the top level for the company, to recheck them at least once a year, maybe once a quarter if it's just a few ones, because sometimes correct experiments also turn out to be wrong. So what might not have worked for you 3 months ago might right now work actually. And I've had that a couple of times where we invalidated something and then 3 months later we actually tested it again and it actually worked. The other thing that I just wanted to say on this one is that I would not consider right now in this market any experiment that is older than like 6 months to be valuable, because the people have changed, your funnels have changed, the learnings have changed, you could have been wrong. So we have to be not proud about this, I think. So to answer your question, yes, we're probably constantly wrong. I think the question is just like, how can you be less wrong than the competition? Because then you have a better product.
Yeah, and that you're kind of alluding to like three different types of wrong. There's the it was right 6 months ago, but not now. There's the I set up my experiment wrong, so maybe I'm looking at the wrong
Yeah,
metric. And then there's just false positive, right? So that if we're doing
yeah.
95% confidence interval, 1 out of 20 experiments that you thought was a winner is actually not a winner. So,
I think it's
definitely.
even. I think it's even worse than this. This is a very common thing that I've also had to learn in my data career. The confidence rating that we have, like let's say we're looking for stat sig for 95%. This is what you said, right? Like the 1 out of 20. In 1 out of 20 cases, the metric is not stat sig, but so even if it is stat sig, you're not 100% sure whether what you're concluding from it is still correct, because we can still misinterpret the result. So this makes it actually much harder. And I think this is what I tell people often. I assume that I'm wrong about 60% of the time, even with quantitative verification, unless it's something very, very simple. And I think if you're working in experimentation, just, and you're doing quite a lot of that stuff, then you really realize that we're just often wrong, even if we have the systems. Um, and it's just important to also not just celebrate the wins. I think I'm trying to also establish right now a culture at Fyxer where we really reward people who are learning from stuff, and learning in the sense of not just the wins should be celebrated, but also like very good setups and thinkings, because we can also learn something from them afterwards. And Ben and the rest of the team are a great example of this, because they have really stepped up to this also like in the last couple of months. And I just wanted to say that it's extremely hard in a scale organization where you have so many people to do that, because it's easy to just like think that, hey, everything is going great, but having to talk to people, interpret results, and also, we also take a beating quite often. We are failing often. We're often wrong. And that is hard sometimes for teams. So we should really reward people for having a good effort as well. That's important in experimentation.
Yeah, it's a great call out. And of course, you know, the vast majority of learning comes from the losers, not the winners. You ship something that's a winner, great, it's a winner, and you ship it. If it's a loser, you're like, okay, well, wait, I thought this was going to be
Yeah,
a winner. Well, what can I learn from it?
yeah,
Great call out.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of jumped into the Q&A already, so just putting it on
I'm
that
sorry.
slide. Yeah, no problem. It was great you responded in real time. One thing I will just point out is our next webinar is coming up July 16th, and that's with Ronnie Kohavi and Luke Sonnet, who's our head of data science. We'll be talking about how to build trustworthy experiments. But now we just want to encourage folks to put in more questions. We have one right now from Christian. How does Fyxer encourage sales and marketing and others in the company to share experiment ideas? One of you want to jump in on that one?
I can start with this, and then Ben, you can also add on top. Just wanted to also say I know Ronnie personally, so next time when he's coming on the call, just tell him that A/B experimentation is a hype because, because then he hates this when I say this, which I didn't. I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. It's just like he's very, very passionate about the topic, and he's a great guest. So I think everybody that is listening to this should also definitely tune in next time. So to the question from Christian. How do you encourage people to share experiment ideas is a very good thing. I think the question should be, how do you share and then also select the correct ideas? So for instance, for us as a company, a big problem that we have, I think, and Ben might be seeing this different, is that we have a lot of salespeople in the organization. So the sales ideas are overly represented in the channels. So what you cannot do is you cannot just like sort by, oh, who has said A 5 times and then you're going to do it. You have to still validate it. So I think collecting ideas is a great thing. I try to increase the cost of collecting ideas a little bit. So what I mean is that if someone is trying to bring an idea, then it needs to be fleshed out a little bit. I do not accept one-liners. I absolutely hate it when the growth team has to figure out something that another department did not flesh out. And we're having this quite sometimes, and it's just very frustrating. And what that does is it reduces the ideas, but it also increases the quality. In an ideal world, you want to have a PM sitting between that is validating the stuff as well. But yeah, Ben, I'm sure you want to add something to this. But yeah, that's how I try to do it.
Let me just start by saying that Ronnie Kohavi is not a close personal friend of mine, but I have asked every new growth engineering hire to read trustworthy online controlled experiments. So I'll be tuning in next week anyway. Yeah, in terms of encouraging people to share experiment ideas, yeah, I don't think it's something we've really had to try and actively do. People are very forthcoming with their ideas. I think it's definitely the quality of the ideas definitely gets better as people run experiments themselves. As marketing have started running more and more experimentation, their experimentation ideas have improved inherently themselves because they understand the process. We maybe are lagging behind a bit in terms of sales also running experimentation to the level that marketing are. But I certainly haven't found that we've needed to prompt people to get the experimentation ideas at all.
Well, it's great you have that culture. Not every organization is like that. And so I definitely have heard from other customers that it's like, if you're having trouble on the idea side, just start testing. And like as you do a few, you realize, oh, I should have thought about this and should have thought about that. And then that leads to new test ideas. So
I think the thing we talked about earlier on around testing in public is really crucial there, because realistically, when we started doing that, we had one salesperson. We had Alex, who was sort of here since day one. But every new salesperson who's joined has joined a company which has inherently a culture of experimentation. So it's very easy if you join that company and the culture is already there to just become a part of it, I think.
got it. Well, next question is, does AI, are you using AI to basically create experiment ideas itself based on the learnings you've had from other experiments?
Yes, they're not very good. I'm working on making them better. I think is probably the one sentence I'll say.
I hope Ben is successful. I am skeptical because this is exactly the judgment layer that you do not want to automate, but we're always open for these ideas, of course. And sometimes I think what I'm really excited about is to have AI to test specific flows for QA after experimentation, also before, for instance, with Playwright, like if you just want to have like something very, very basic. But I think where AI can really help also with judgment is to find specific patterns, for instance. So yes, sometimes you do find ideas with AI. They're not very good, that's true. But I think you can use AI for pattern matching on stuff that does not require judgment. Then yes, of course. So for instance, like, I don't know, certain CTAs are not the same, or there's a consistency problem around the product and so forth. These ideas I find very valuable because a human just wouldn't.
I think the other thing to your question there, Dylan, is even bad ideas that are novel tend to trigger some sort of new pathway in your brain. So I often find that even when I'm getting bad ideation ideas using AI and our learnings, one in maybe five will make me think, oh, what a terrible idea. But maybe we could apply that in this way with these people. I think it can be a useful tool.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
I
Well,
think, can I add something to this? That was a really good one that you just did, Ben. I think there's one group that is always giving us the worst ideas, and that's the customers. They always have the wrong ideas for the correct problems. So when you're talking to them, what often happens is they think that, oh, can't you just change this? Can you just change that? And exactly what Ben just described is happening in that you're listening to them. The idea that they had is completely wrong, but you realize, oh shit, they're actually having a different problem underneath that we should solve different. And yeah, so it's a great point. Bad ideas are not necessarily just bad. It's true.
yeah, I love that. I love that because they're even within the idea, they're still telling you what their problem is. So maybe they haven't come up with the right solution, but they've helped you identify a problem. So that's terrific. Well, Leah and Ben, thank you so much for coming on today's webinar. That's all the questions we have. So I want to thank everyone for joining, and again, encourage you to check out the next webinar. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much for having
Thank
us.
you.